Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, March 17th, 2021. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I didn't even realize that it was St. Patrick's Day today. If you didn't know, I'm Irish. It's just a little interesting tidbit about me, but happy St. Patrick's Day. I had no idea. I guess I lost all sense of time as this pandemic has been going on for over a year now, which I think is insane to comprehend. But, let's move on to things that have to do with the title of this video, which is this new Iowa poll from the Des Moines Register that shows that the majority of Iowa voters do not want Senator Chuck Grassley from this state to run for re-election in 2022. Now, we've been mentioning 2022 as potentially a red wave year, but so far we've seen a total of 5 Republican incumbents announce they are retiring in the United States Senate. We all know how close the Senate was back in 2020 and currently is with a 50-50 majority for the Democratic Party. 5 Republicans have chosen to retire. 0 Democrats have chosen the same exact option. So at this point in time, the Democratic Party looks as if they are doing better than the GOP, with 0 Republicans poised to retire, potentially 1, Senator Patrick Leahy from the state of Vermont. Other than that, we probably won't see a major retirement. Even then, it's not even considered to be major. Compared to some of these 4 out of the 5 states with retiring incumbents, these are popular incumbents or narrowly elected incumbents in the past that are making the states more competitive or could potentially lead them to being more solid for their respective party. But looking at this new poll, the reason why I am focusing on this poll is because it was actually done by Selzer & Company, which was the only accurate pollster of both the 2020 and 2016 election cycle. They were the only pollster to show that Donald Trump would win by nearly 8 points, 7 points in both elections. So they got it nearly right on the money, closer than any other pollster twice. And they seem to be getting the state correctly. And as of right now, it looks as if just 28% of Iowa voters want Chuck Grassley to retire. Want Chuck Grassley to run again. 55% say they do not want him to run again. So what this would do is essentially just going to add another state to the retiring incumbent list. Now, if you don't know why Iowa is so important, it's because the state has a traditionally competitive history. Back in 2012, Obama won the state of Iowa by nearly 6 points. In 2020, Donald Trump won the state by 8 points. And while it has had a dramatic shift, you do have to realize that the state is not considered to be safe. Without Donald Trump on the ballot, for example, 2018, the Democratic Party actually did surprisingly well. They won 3 House races in Iowa, nearly 4, and that was a very strange time because they didn't even come close in 2020 to winning all 4. But looking at what happened in 2018, the Democratic Party practically swept the state. They still lost the governor election, but not nearly as much as they did lose it on the presidential level in 2020. And without Donald Trump on that ballot, the GOP might not be as favored as they might think because Iowa voters seem to be very much happy with President Trump and the way that he handled his presidency. Whereas otherwise, without him, they may not be too encouraged to vote for the GOP. Donald Trump certainly was that deciding factor for many of these Iowa voters in 2020 and in 2016. But if you're looking at Iowa, adding it in here into the retiring column means that the factor of the incumbency is no longer there. Now, just a little bit of a background story on Chuck Grassley. If you don't know him as a candidate or as a person, first things first, he's been in office in the Senate for 4 decades now. On top of that, he's been serving Iowa in one way, either through the state delegation or through the House of Representatives or through the Senate for a total of 62 years. Now, Iowa has only been around for nearly 160 years. So that means that for nearly 35% of Iowa's state existence, Chuck Grassley has been a representative in one way or another. So for a third of the state's existence, Chuck Grassley has been here. He's the most senior member of the Republican Party. He's currently in his 7th term, and if he runs in 2022, it will be seeking out an 8th term. And, looking at his age right now, he's currently I believe 85 years old. It might be 87 years old. And, people are going to bring that up because by the time we reach 2022, at that point in time, after the election, he will be 80, or right before the election, he will be 89. And I think that's something that many Republican voters are worried about. And also, he has acknowledged this back in 2022 when they asked about whether or not he was going to run. He pretty much just said, I don't want to be like other Republicans or other senators that have been in the Senate that have ultimately just refused to retire and then either, had to leave office forcefully or were incapable of representing their constituents correctly on the Senate level, and that's what Chuck Grassley is trying to avoid. And it looks as if Iowa voters here, the most accurate pollster in the entire state, is showing us that the voters here do not want Chuck Grassley to run again. 55% say, we hope you don't want to run again. 28% say, we hope he decides to run again, and 17% are unsure. But this 55% number certainly should be alarming, at least for the GOP. And it should be something of a warning sign, because while Chuck Grassley really hasn't had a super competitive race in his entire Senate history, 2022 might be that year. Even if he retires, there's no saying that the Republican Party will be solid in this race. I don't think the GOP will be solid either way, which puts them in a difficult predicament. Now, Chuck Grassley probably would outperform a standard Republican, but considering that I'm seeing numbers now, and before I wouldn't have said this, but after seeing these numbers, I'm not too confident that these voters here would be too keen on re-electing him, given his old age. It looks as if 35% of Republicans hope he does not decide to run, which I think is very interesting, considering that he's pretty much an electoral juggernaut. Let's take a look. Well, 2016 is a perfect example. Donald Trump won this state by nearly 10 points. It was a very large margin, and the Democratic Party absolutely got blown out. If you look at the change from 2012, every single county, with the exception of a few, voted to the right of where they did in 2012, significantly further to the right. Looking, though, in the Senate race in 2016, what you might notice is that it won to Chuck Grassley by an even larger margin, by 25 percentage points to be exact. That's a lot. Looking at Hillary Clinton's lackluster performance, she at least won more than, one county. The Senate results ultimately gave one county in total, Johnson County, to the Democrats here. And it's just one of the most partisan counties in the entire state for the Democratic Party. So looking at the entire county map here, Chuck Grassley decimated his opponent, and the Democratic Party really didn't contest it because it just simply wasn't winnable. As I had said before, this is not Chuck Grassley's first rodeo with the Senate election in Iowa. He defeated a Democratic incumbent in 1980 by 8 points, and since then, he had never faced a competitive race. In 1986, a 66% victory. In 1992, 70%. In 98, 68%. In 2004, 70%. 2010, 64%. 2016, 60%. Really, we haven't seen it dip below 60% since 1980. So 4 decades have passed since it's been that close. Beyond, 4 decades at this point, which is very insane to think about, but that's just the realistic part of Chuck Grassley as a candidate. However, at that point in time in 2016, the majority of Iowa voters did not care if he decided to run again. We have had senators serve longer than Chuck Grassley currently is old, but it is also, a realistic thing that maybe he won't be able to serve out his full term. Obviously, that's just something that is very unfortunate to think about, but when you reach a certain age, it does start to circulate in the minds of voters, as it did with previous presidential candidates, both Donald Trump and Joe Biden in 2020, John McCain in 2008. This was a very serious question that voters did care about and did change their responses as to how they voted as a result of this. And I think this really could cripple the GOP's chances in 2022, either if they run Chuck Grassley and ultimately the voters here still don't want him to run, unless he's able to win over voters the same way he did back in the previous elections, which I think is very possible. I think they're also putting themselves at a point where it's going to be more competitive just because voters are afraid that Chuck Grassley might not be able to serve a full term due to health reasons that might force him to leave the United States Senate or retire early. The same thing that we saw what happened with Johnny Isakson in Georgia. That's the reason why that Georgia Senate special election was up in 2020. That race should have not been up in 2020. So had Johnny Isakson not retired, we would have seen a Republican majority. However, he had to retire. He felt as if that he could no longer serve his constituents to the best of his ability, and he was afraid about health concerns. And that's something that could be an issue with Chuck Grassley and could lead the Democratic Party to potentially winning the seat. The Republican Party just got burned in Georgia after a retirement that was early, and ultimately I think that the Democratic Party is looking for opportunities, such as this one, for either Chuck Grassley not to run because it's an open race, which makes it more competitive, or that he does decide to run, and they pretty much harp on the fact that the majority of voters have told Chuck Grassley not to run, and he defies their expectations, and that the argument that he might be too out of touch with Iowa voters is something that I think could be made at this point in time. And 6 retiring Republicans, I would not be surprised if Chuck Grassley decides not to run. He has informed the media that he will decide a year to 8 months till the 2022 election. So it's going to be a waiting game at this point for him to make his final decision. But I think it's very much an indicator when we start to see this circulation amongst the media here and amongst the voters in these states. When Iowa voters are saying, I want Chuck Grassley to retire, chances are he's going to be pressured, even by members of the GOP. While he has had a very strong electoral presence, at some point that will dissipate. And I think 2022, while he would still be able to win, it certainly would be closer than it has been in years past simply because of his age. Health is a very important issue that people vote on, and it was something that was brought up specifically in 2020 with Donald Trump and Joe Biden. People questioned Joe Biden's mental capability. People questioned if Donald Trump was going to be able to be fine after COVID-19. I mean, looking at this discussion, health also with Hillary Clinton in 2016, with Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020, these are issues that are important to the American public. And in many ways, Chuck Grassley does fit this a stereotype that, some of these politicians are too out of touch and that they're too old for politics. He will be the oldest Republican in the Senate, and I believe the oldest senator as of right now. I think it's comparable to Don Young in Alaska, who's an 87, I think maybe even 88-year-old Republican representative, the oldest representative from the Republican Party in the House. So looking at this map so far, I would not be surprised if Chuck Grassley does not decide to run. And I also think that some Republicans might be afraid of running for re-election, or that the GOP today is too representative of Donald Trump rather than the traditional GOP values that they jumped onto in the beginning of their entering into the political stage. And, looking at the popularity rating for Joe Biden, looking at the numbers so far, they honestly have to see these. I can guarantee you that a lot of the times that these representatives, these senators, these national figureheads are constantly checking the numbers, because the numbers typically don't lie. What we're seeing so far is that Joe Biden is maintaining his approval rating amongst the American people. COVID-19 relief is passing with 0 Republican votes, and compromise is a thing of the past, at least at this point in time. And the GOP seems to be, trying to use that against Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, but it simply isn't working due to the sheer popularity of the COVID-19 relief bill and the decline in COVID-19 cases and the increasing in vaccination efforts across the country. All of this is benefiting Joe Biden, and many Republicans are starting to see the warning signs that, wait a minute, 2022 may not be that red wave year. And this addition of Iowa, potentially, I think the fact that it's even in the discussion really goes to show that the GOP is going to be at a point where they are going to likely be lost with some of these candidates. They very well could nominate someone who's been backed by President Trump, but unless it is President Trump, I can't imagine the same amount of support for them as what we saw happen for President Trump in Iowa and other battleground states. I mean, looking at the retiring list, 6 is a lot. 5 is a lot. And if Iowa is made that 6, I think that it's going to be very interesting what happens. And I think it's already a telling sign that we have 0 Democrats retiring, at most 1, and 5 Republicans already. I think it is a very telling sign, and it does indicate the direction of the GOP, because it also gives Trump-like Republicans the opportunities to potentially win some Senate races here and hold influence for the former president in many, many ways. So pretty much a recap here is that Iowa is traditionally competitive. It is a state that has gone to the Democratic Party as recently as 2012, to the Republican Party in 2020, but it is still pretty competitive. The only senator that really wasn't in a competitive position was not Joni Ernst, but rather Chuck Grassley. He decimated his opponents at almost every single step of the way, and he's been serving in Iowa in one way or another for the past 60 years. So he's been here for a very long period of time. He's been representing voters for practically his entire adulthood, and it looks as if at this point he might be making a change, or he might decide against running, and it looks as if the voters are asking him to do so as well. This is the most accurate pollster in the state of Iowa, and we find that 28% say, I want Chuck Grassley to go ahead and run again. You know what that means? The rest of them are either undecided or they do not want him to run again. 53% hope Chuck Grassley does not run again in the state of Iowa. Again, the most accurate pollster. So I find that to be very interesting, but largely due to the fact that it's simply just his age. I think that if he was younger, people wouldn't have a problem with him running again, because there's a reason why he wins by absolutely obliterating margins, not because, of his voting history or whatever it might be, just purely because of his popularity and his name recognition across the state. He's been here since 1980. He's been in that Senate seat since President Jimmy Carter, one of the last standing representatives or senators that served during the Carter administration. And, looking at the numbers here for the Republican Party on the Senate map, I think that what we're starting to see is that the Senate map is stacking up against the GOP. And I think Iowa being included could very well add to that. but also it seems as if the voters are very clear in their answer that they do not want Chuck Grassley to run for re-election, and I'm sure that most of it is just centered around his age, the fact that he's much, much older than other senators, and to a point that he might not even be able to serve out a full term and forced to retire the same way, what we saw with Johnny Isakson in the state of Georgia. So it's going to be very interesting. We will see what happens. We will see if he follows the will of the voters. Keep in mind that a lot more polls are going to start being released. We're going to start to see matchups between Grassley and some Democrats. So I think the Republican Party might be in a difficult position here in Iowa, but I do think that they will come to a point where Chuck Grassley will ultimately decide to retire, and we could see someone within his family or someone just notable within the GOP to rise up and run for the Senate seat. But I think that as of right now, the speculation definitely indicates that this is absolutely in discussion, and it's definitely a real possibility for Iowa Republicans. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.